He was the owner who walked through the golden age of football with a smile on his face and a storm in his shadow. Art Modell entered the league as a charismatic businessman who promised stability and vision. Yet everywhere he went, he left behind arguments, resentments, and wounds that never fully healed. His story is not one of simple victories or clean legacies. It is the story of a man who believed he was saving the game while many others believed he was tearing it apart. From the earliest days of his ownership, the whispers began. Players felt controlled, coaches felt monitored, and the city he called home felt both pride and fear in equal measure. No relationship captured this tension more than his quiet war with Jim Brown, the brightest star of the era. Their connection was built on talent and power, then slowly transformed into mistrust and silence. It was the first fracture that revealed who Art Modell truly was. Yet that was only the beginning. The decisions he made in the years that followed would turn teammates against him, turn entire cities against him, and turn his name into one of the most polarizing in the history of the league. To some, he was a visionary. To others, he was the architect of unforgettable betrayals. And as he grew older, he understood that every choice he made carried a price that would follow him long after he was gone. Why did Art Modell believe he was right, even when the world around him insisted he was wrong? Art Modell stepped into professional football during a time when the league was growing, uncertain, and desperate for strong leadership. Born in Brooklyn and shaped by the straightforward toughness of mid-century America, he carried with him a businessman's confidence and an entertainer's instinct for drama. When he purchased the Cleveland franchise in the early 1960s, he presented himself as the modern owner. He promised structure, ambition, and a new era of professionalism. The city welcomed him with open arms because he appeared willing to lift the team beyond its limitations. For a while, the partnership seemed perfect. The organization gained national attention. Stadium improvements arrived. Television negotiations grew more ambitious. Modell enjoyed being at the center of that attention. He liked being seen as the quiet force, guiding the league into a brighter future. Yet beneath the public charm, there lived a man who needed control. Coaches felt it early. Staff members noticed it during long meetings that stretched late into the night. Modell believed the owner should be involved in every corner of the organization. He attended practices. He questioned strategies. He carried himself as if he understood the emotional temperature of the locker room more than the people working inside it. To many, he was simply engaged. To others, he was crossing a line that had been respected for decades. This tension shaped every decision that followed. The league itself was changing. New television deals brought money and pressure. Rival franchises grew stronger. Personalities inside the game became more powerful. Modell saw this shift and felt both excitement and fear. He wanted to protect his influence. He wanted to remain the man who could shape the narrative. That desire guided his actions, even when those actions collided with the pride of players and the loyalty of fans. His relationship with Jim Brown became the clearest example. Brown was not only the greatest player of his time, he was also a symbol of independence during an era when athletes were beginning to push back against authority. Modell believed he could manage that independence. Brown believed no owner should try. Outside the locker room, the city of Cleveland watched this dynamic with anxiety. Modell had promised stability. He had promised growth. But the cracks were beginning to show. Disagreements with coaches, tension with stars, subtle hints of mismatched visions. These moments felt small at first, but each one added weight to the future. As the years passed, the pattern repeated. Modell wanted control. Others wanted freedom. What began as a promising partnership slowly transformed into a complicated story, defined by ambition, pride, and decisions that carried consequences far beyond the field. The man who once seemed like a savior of the franchise was becoming a figure surrounded by doubt. Every choice he made seemed to deepen the divide between what he believed he was building and what the city believed he was destroying. It was the setting for one of the most polarizing journeys in the history of the league. Number 5. In the story of Art Modell's unforgettable conflicts, is a figure who rarely appears at the center of mainstream conversations. Yet his clash with Modell revealed a pattern that would shape the owner's entire legacy. The figure was Paul Brown, the legendary coach whose name defined discipline, innovation, and football intellect. When Modell arrived, Brown was already an institution. He had built the culture, the system, and the identity of the franchise. Players respected him. Fans worshipped him. And the league considered him one of its brightest strategic minds. To Modell, however, Brown represented something more complicated. He was a force that could challenge authority. He was a man who commanded respect in ways an owner could not. For a young, ambitious Modell, who wanted full control, this dynamic felt like a warning. The first signs of tension appeared behind closed doors. Brown was known for running everything with precision. Schedules, meetings, player evaluations. Modell wanted involvement in these same areas. He appeared at practices. He asked questions during conversations that Brown believed should remain internal to the coaching staff. Modell's approach felt intrusive. Even if he insisted he was simply learning, soon disagreements emerged. Brown believed player personnel decisions should belong to the football staff. Modell believed the owner should have a voice on every matter. Differences in philosophy were becoming differences in power. The turning point arrived when the team experienced a difficult stretch. Losses piled up, and the city demanded answers. Modell saw an opportunity to shape the narrative. Brown saw a dangerous shift, a moment where an owner was stepping beyond his place. Reports from the time described meetings filled with tension. Modell wanted change. Brown wanted autonomy. Their relationship, once cautiously respectful, began to collapse. To many inside the organization, Brown represented tradition and expertise. Modell represented ambition and modern business instincts. The clash between them was almost inevitable. The most symbolic moment came in the early 1960s, when Modell made the decision that would define his reputation for decades. He fired Paul Brown. It was a move that shocked the league, because Brown was more than a coach. He was a symbol of excellence. Modell justified the decision by saying the team needed new energy. Brown saw it as betrayal. Players were stunned. Fans were divided. The league took notice. Modell had removed a giant, and in doing so, he revealed his willingness to prioritize control over legacy and loyalty. The consequences of that moment lasted far beyond their professional separation. Brown carried the resentment with him, later building a new franchise that became a powerhouse and a symbol of his enduring genius. Modell, meanwhile, could never escape the shadow of that decision. Every major conflict that followed, from tensions with star players to the catastrophic relationship with a city he once promised to protect, carried echoes of his early battle with Brown. It became the blueprint others used to interpret his actions. The cold truth is simple. Modell never forgave the challenge that Brown's authority represented, and Brown never forgave the dismissal that ended his era. Their story became the first sign of the divides that would follow Modell for the rest of his life. Number 4. In the long line of conflicts that shaped Art Modell's legacy, centers around a man who embodied the city's passion more powerfully than any executive ever could. Marty Schottenheimer. He was the coach who revived a struggling organization, the coach who restored pride to a fan base, and the coach who believed discipline, toughness, and unity could overcome any obstacle. His philosophy aimed to rebuild the franchise through patience and shared purpose. For a brief moment, it looked as if Modell and Schottenheimer were the perfect pair. One provided financial backing, the other engineered on-field brilliance. But underneath the early success lived a clash of personalities that would slowly grow into a divide. Schottenheimer demanded autonomy. He believed a coach should build a system without interference. He believed leadership was earned through consistency and clarity. Modell, however, believed an owner deserved full access to decisions because he carried the financial risk. Meetings began to stretch longer. Conversations felt heavier. Modell routinely asked questions that Schottenheimer saw as intrusions. Even during winning streaks, tension lingered, because both men viewed leadership through completely different lenses. Modell wanted influence. Schottenheimer wanted respect for his space. The conflict became visible during pivotal roster decisions. Schottenheimer believed in stability at quarterback and running back, two positions central to his system. Modell favored moves that created excitement, believing fans deserved bold changes. These disagreements were small at first, but each one added pressure. Assistant coaches noticed the shift. Players felt the strain. The owner and the head coach were no longer working parallel to one another. They were pulling in opposite directions. The defining moment came during a playoff run that captured national attention. The team played with remarkable discipline and heart, a reflection of Schottenheimer's leadership. Fans embraced him. Broadcasters praised him. Modell, though supportive publicly, privately felt overshadowed. Winning brought glory, and glory brought tension. After a narrow postseason loss that left the stadium silent, questions about the future emerged. Schottenheimer wanted more control over personnel and strategy. Modell saw that request as a threat to his authority. The air between them became cold. Their final rupture arrived when negotiations for Schottenheimer's continued leadership reached a painful conclusion. He chose to resign rather than be constrained by an owner who he felt did not trust his vision. The city reacted with disbelief. This was the coach who had brought them back to national relevance. He had earned loyalty. He had earned time. But in the end, the same pattern repeated. Modell's need for influence outweighed the stability of a coach who had given everything to rebuild the team. The aftermath lasted for years. Fans blamed Modell for driving away the coach who had turned hope into reality. Schottenheimer moved on to other franchises, continuing his reputation as a builder and a leader. Modell remained in Cleveland, but another bridge had burned. Another chapter had closed with doubt and frustration. The cold truth is clear. Modell admired Schottenheimer's discipline and success, yet he could not accept a figure whose authority rivaled his own. And Schottenheimer, a man of principle, could not stay in a world where his vision was constrained. Number 3 on the list of unforgettable conflicts that carved Art Modell's reputation is the one that unfolded far from the sidelines, but struck directly at the heart of the community he once promised to protect. This conflict was not with a coach or a player. It was with an entire city. Cleveland was more than a location on the map. It was the emotional engine of the franchise, and the foundation of Modell's identity as an owner. For decades, he spoke of loyalty, stability, and the bond between team and community. Yet behind that language lived a growing financial tension and a complicated truth about the direction of the league. Modell felt pressure. The old stadium demanded upgrades. Revenues lagged behind other franchises. He believed the city was not keeping pace with the financial evolution of modern football. The gap between his public promises and private frustrations widened with each passing season. The earliest signs of this fracture appeared during negotiations for stadium improvements. Modell asked for renovations and revenue changes that he believed were essential for survival. City officials argued that public funds had limits and priorities elsewhere. Modell saw their resistance as disregard for his commitment. The city saw his demands as excessive. What began as a business discussion turned into a personal divide. Fans sensed a shift. They had always viewed Modell as part of the city's identity, but rumors of disagreements and financial strain sparked fear. The emotional connection that once felt unbreakable was developing cracks. The turning point arrived when other cities began offering proposals. They promised modern facilities, new revenue structures, and opportunities that Cleveland had been unable or unwilling to match. Modell studied these offers quietly. He told himself he was acting in the best interest of the team. But the silence itself was a betrayal in the eyes of the community. While fans filled the stadium each week with unwavering loyalty, private meetings elsewhere were shaping the future of their team. The distance between Modell and Cleveland was no longer symbolic. It was becoming an irreversible divide. The most explosive moment came in the mid-1990s, when Modell made the announcement that would define his legacy forever. The team was relocating. Shock swept through the city. Anger turned to disbelief. Disbelief turned to heartbreak. Fans cried in the streets. Former players expressed sadness and fury. Local businesses, built around decades of football tradition, saw their futures collapse. Modell insisted the decision was necessary for survival. Cleveland saw it as betrayal of the highest level. They believed he abandoned them after decades of loyalty. The emotional cost was far greater than any financial calculation. The aftermath became one of the most painful chapters in sports history. Legal battles followed. Protests filled the streets. The league intervened to preserve the team's identity for future restoration. Modell moved forward with the relocated franchise. But the shadow of what he left behind never faded. For many in Cleveland, the name Art Modell became synonymous with broken trust. The cold truth is this: Modell believed he made a business decision. Cleveland believed he committed an unforgivable act. Their relationship, once the foundation of his ownership, transformed into one of the league's deepest and most enduring divides. Standing at number 2 is the conflict that exposed the core of Art Modell's philosophy. The clash that began long before he was a seasoned owner, and long before the city turned against him. It was the quiet but powerful divide between Modell and Jim Brown, the most dominant athlete of his era. Their relationship started with respect. Modell admired Brown's talent, charisma, and impact on the league. He saw him as the perfect symbol for a modern franchise, but Brown belonged to a new generation of players. He valued independence. He valued freedom of expression, and he refused to bend to authority when he believed it was unjust. These contrasting instincts set the stage for one of the most memorable rifts in football history. The earliest strain emerged in the mid-1960s, when Brown began stepping into the world of acting. Hollywood recognized his presence. Directors saw in him a rare combination of physical strength and natural screen charisma. He was no longer only a football star. He was on the path to becoming a cultural icon. Modell supported this shift publicly, but privately, he feared losing control. To him, a player's commitments outside football threatened team stability. To Brown, a player's life beyond the field was part of personal growth. Their worldviews collided. Conversations became sharp, expectations became unclear. The defining moment arrived during the filming of a major Hollywood production. Brown requested additional time, explaining the importance of the opportunity and the professionalism required to complete the project. Modell insisted he return immediately for training camp. Brown believed he had earned the right to manage his schedule responsibly. Modell believed rules must apply without exception. Their dialogue reached a breaking point. When Brown did not return on the timeline Modell demanded, the owner issued an ultimatum that carried the weight of authority more than the spirit of partnership. What followed became a seismic event in sports culture. Jim Brown, the greatest player in the league, announced his retirement. It was not because he was physically unable to continue. It was because he refused to allow an owner to dictate the boundaries of his life beyond the game. Fans were stunned. Reporters rushed to understand the deeper story. Modell attempted to frame the event as a necessary stand for discipline. Brown framed it as a stand for dignity. Their perspectives were incompatible, and their separation became a symbol of the evolving relationship between athletes and authority in America. The aftermath shaped the identities of both men. Brown moved into acting full-time and became one of the first modern athlete celebrities. He continued to influence culture through film, activism, and public leadership. Modell, meanwhile, faced criticism from fans and analysts who believed he had pushed away a generational talent out of pride. For years, the relationship remained distant. Their silent feud became a reminder of the broader tensions between ownership and player empowerment. The cold truth is undeniable. Modell saw himself as defending the principles of team structure. Brown saw himself as defending personal freedom. Their conflict was not just about schedules or responsibilities. It was about who held the power to define the life of a star. And neither man was willing to yield. At number 1 stands the conflict that forever linked Art Modell's name to one of the league's most emotional, painful, and historically charged events. It was not a disagreement with a coach. It was not a power struggle with a player. It was the ultimate confrontation between an owner and the very identity of a sports community. This was the conflict with the soul of Cleveland itself. During the relocation era, While the earlier rift with the city had shaken trust, the final decision to uproot the franchise ignited a level of fury and heartbreak unmatched in the league's history. It became the defining moment of Modell's life, a moment that overshadowed every victory and every partnership he ever built. The early signs of this conflict can be traced to years of quieter strain. Cleveland Stadium was aging. Revenues stagnated. Competing franchises secured modern facilities. Modell felt cornered by financial responsibility. But the people of Cleveland believed the team was a sacred institution, tied to family history, neighborhood pride, and generational memory. They filled the stands through storms, losing seasons, and shifting eras. They held traditions that extended far beyond football. Modell saw a business model under threat. Cleveland saw their identity being weighed on a balance sheet. This fundamental difference shaped every conversation. The rupture intensified when proposals from other cities arrived. New stadiums, revenue guarantees, corporate partnerships. Private meetings took place as Modell weighed his options. He justified these actions as professional necessity. Yet those meetings symbolized secrecy, and secrecy represented betrayal. Fans sensed distance. Local leaders sensed urgency. Modell remained silent publicly, but internally he had already begun leaning toward a future away from Cleveland. In those quiet decisions, decades of loyalty began to unravel. The defining moment came with the announcement that stunned not just the city, but the entire country. The franchise was leaving. Streets filled with protesters. Radios aired emotional calls from lifelong fans. Television cameras captured supporters tearing posters and crying outside the stadium. Families who had shared season tickets for generations suddenly felt abandoned. The team was not just a sports organization. It was part of the cultural identity of the region, tied to memories, rituals, and relationships. Modell insisted he had no choice, pointing to financial realities. The city insisted no justification could excuse what felt like a breach of community trust. In the aftermath, the conflict evolved from disappointment into one of the league's darkest historical chapters. Legal battles unfolded. The league negotiated a complex settlement that preserved the team's name and history for eventual restoration. Modell moved forward with his new organization, trying to rebuild his image, but the shadow of Cleveland's pain followed him. Everywhere the topic resurfaced, it carried the weight of loss. For many, Modell's name became synonymous with heartbreak, a reminder of the delicate connection between sports teams and the communities they anchor. The cold truth is this: Modell believed he acted out of necessity to secure the future of the franchise. Cleveland believed he chose profit over people. The emotional gulf between these perspectives was too deep to repair. This conflict did not simply shape his legacy, it became his legacy. Every memory of Art Modell is filtered through this defining moment. Every conversation about him returns to that winter announcement, that sense of betrayal, and that fracture between owner and city. There is one more figure whose connection to Art Modell reveals a quieter, but equally powerful, truth about his legacy. This was a man who never shouted, never confronted, and never sought the spotlight. Yet his departure from the franchise exposed a pattern that echoed through Modell's entire tenure. That man was Ozzie Newsome. He was not just a Hall of Fame tight end. He was one of the most respected minds in the building, a bridge between generations, and a symbol of dignity within the organization. After retiring from the field, Newsome moved into the front office, where his intelligence, empathy, and long-term vision quickly made him a central force behind personnel decisions. At first, Modell valued his presence. Newsome's calm nature balanced the turbulence around the franchise. He was respected by players, trusted by coaches, and admired by staff. But when the relocation crisis erupted, the burden on front office members intensified. Newsome found himself in the emotional crossfire. He understood the pain of the city because he had played for those fans. He saw their heartbreak. He felt their anger. Yet he also recognized the business discussions behind closed doors. He lived in both worlds. And in both worlds, he saw fractures widening too quickly to repair. The defining moment for Newsome came not through confrontation, but through a quiet acceptance of reality. When the team moved, he stayed with the new organization, using his talents to build one of the most successful front offices in modern football. Fans in Cleveland could not blame him. They blamed the man above him. But Newsome's transition highlighted a truth that Modell never fully grasped. Loyalty cannot be demanded. It must be earned and protected. Newsome remained respected everywhere he went. Modell did not. The cold truth is simple. Newsome carried the legacy of leadership that the city admired, while Modell carried the decisions that the city could not forgive. As the years passed, the conflicts that shaped Art Modell's journey began to weave themselves into a single narrative, a narrative defined less by victories on the field and more by the weight of choices that followed him until his final days. His story was never simple. It was a landscape of ambition, pride, hope, and regret. What began as the bold vision of a young owner evolved into a legacy that divided generations. Modell believed he was guiding the franchise towards survival and growth, yet those who lived through his decisions believed he had placed control above loyalty. This tension became the heart of his legacy. The journey started with the removal of Paul Brown, a decision that revealed Modell's belief in decisive authority. It continued with the escalating tensions between him and Marty Schottenheimer, a conflict that displayed how leadership clashes can fracture even the most promising eras. But the emotional core of his story lay in his relationship with Jim Brown, a symbol of the rising power of athletes and a turning point where the balance between ownership and player independence began to shift. Each conflict told a different story, yet all carried the same quiet truth. Modell wanted to shape the world around him, even when the world resisted. These conflicts grew heavier as the decades moved forward. The city that once embraced him with hope began to view him with suspicion. Cleveland had lived through triumphs, heartbreaks, and seasons filled with raw emotion. But the bond between a football franchise and its community is built on trust. Modell's decisions regarding stadium finances, public commitments, and private meetings eroded that trust slowly. Then, suddenly, when the relocation arrived, it was no longer a single choice. It was the breaking point of decades of unresolved tension. This moment became the climax of his life. Nothing before it, and nothing after it, could eclipse the emotional force of that decision. Fans who had celebrated championships felt abandoned. Children who grew up in the shadow of the stadium watched their heroes disappear overnight. Local businesses that depended on game day culture saw their futures crumble. Modell defended himself with the language of necessity, financial burden, and franchise survival. But for Cleveland, the explanations did not matter. They had lost a piece of themselves. That loss became the lens through which they would interpret everything Modell ever did. Yet the truth of his legacy carries a deeper complexity. Modell was not a villain by design. He was a man who believed deeply in the game, in its stories, its future, and its meaning to American culture. He helped grow television revenues. He supported league-wide innovation. He backed initiatives that shaped the modern era of football. These achievements were real, and they influenced the direction of the sport for decades. But the emotional cost of his decisions, especially the one that fractured Cleveland, overshadowed his contributions in the eyes of many who lived through the turmoil. As he grew older, Modell spoke softly of regret, though rarely directly. His words hinted at an awareness that the world saw him differently than he saw himself. The owner who once stood confidently at press conferences now carried a quieter tone, a voice marked by years of criticism and the echo of a city's anger. The truth of his legacy lies somewhere between the man he believed he was and the man the world believed him to be. A visionary to some, a betrayer to others, a builder of opportunity, yet also a remover of home. His story forces us to confront a difficult reality about leadership in sports. Progress requires decisions. Decisions have consequences, and consequences do not fade simply because intentions were complex. When Modell passed away in 2012 at the age of 87, the reaction revealed the full weight of his legacy. Some remembered the moments of glory. Others remembered the heartbreak. The divide remained intact. His life became a reminder that that the bond between owners, players, and communities is fragile. Once broken, it can redefine a lifetime. The heart of this story is not about whether Modell was right or wrong. It is about the enduring impact of choices made at the intersection of pride, pressure, and legacy. It is about the truth that leadership without empathy can lead to victories that feel like losses. And it is about how a single decision can shape how history remembers a man, no matter how hard he tried to build something greater. Every legacy in football is shaped by choices. But few stories force us to confront the meaning of loyalty, leadership, and consequence the way Art Modell's story does. His journey reminds us that a single decision can echo through generations, changing not only franchises, but the emotional landscape of entire cities. As you reflect on the conflicts that defined his life, from the Battle of Wills with Jim Brown to the storm that erupted when the team left Cleveland, one question rises above all others. Which moment revealed the deepest truth about the man behind the decisions? Was it the early dismissal of Paul Brown that signaled a new era of authority? Or the quiet clash with Marty Schottenheimer that exposed the cost of control? Was it the standoff with Jim Brown that transformed the relationship between athletes and owners? Or the day Cleveland learned that its team was gone? These moments shaped the path of a man who believed he was acting for the future, even as the past was breaking beneath him. I want to hear what you think. Which conflict shocked you the most? Which choice do you believe carried the greatest weight? Do you think Modell was misunderstood? Or do you believe the city's anger will always be justified? Your voice is part of this conversation. Because stories like this live on through the people who remember, debate, and question the decisions that shape the game. If you found meaning in uncovering these hidden truths, if you want to explore more stories buried beneath the surface of football's golden age, make sure to subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. This channel is dedicated to bringing you the untold journeys of the legends who built the sport, the rivalries that changed history, and the decisions that still spark debate today. Your support helps keep these stories alive.